My name is Vladimir Vasic, and I am today moderator of our institutional panel. Let's say that I'm sitting on special chair. Where is our friend? It's called Chilim, or Kilim on Turkish. I could say that, let's say, combination of history and the future. It's something. Maybe that's why I'm sitting on Kilim or Chilim. Today, I would like to present my panelists, and starting from the lady, Ms. Mina Srećković, SRG Law Firm. Hi, hello, Mina. Mr. Faih Karaca, Halbank. Sorry, Mina is senior associate, if I'm right?
That's right, but head of the Banking and Finance Department.
Yes, okay, thank you. Mr. Faih Karaca is advisor to CEO and president of the Association of Turkish and Serbian Business Club. Mr. Filip Stikić, my colleague from Unicredit Bank, Serbia, head of large, medium corporates and financial institution department. And Mr. Bogdan Vujović, partner Eco Digital, lawyer in economist. So this is my panelist, or your panelist today. And when we're speaking about the topic, usually we are seeing, or I saw somewhere that the word or sentence, the missing trillions for climate change. And the new World Bank report, let's call this report detox report, they're saying that there is a huge increase of subsidized given to something which is not green. And there is a huge opportunity and possibility to redirect this subsidies in something which is green, more sustainable and more efficient. And when you look what governors or what the president of government, let's say, put the pledge in Paris Agreement, they say that we'll invest so much money, but we are seeing that 6 times more we are giving to something which is subsidized fossil fuel consumption and similar, which is, again, increasing climate change, toxic air pollution, inefficiency, and also mounting or increasing debts. So there is a huge potential to unlock, and last they're saying in this report, at least $500 billion, and to redirect this money in something which is more green. So based on this, we're saying that there is plenty of bottleneck, and there is always some obstacles which are making or putting the pressure on all of us who are trying to move forward, like labor shortage in engineering and construction, limited access to land and permits, inflation, and supply chain constraints. So back to the point, we have our colleagues who are here on panel, and I will start with our lady, and with the first question. How SRG serves clients in respect of the implementation of ESG standards? Mina, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Just to check if this is working. Okay. So a bit of background, I think, before I go into answering these particular questions, why ESG is important and why I am the panelist today that will be talking about this topic. I think everybody in the room is aware of the fact that ESG has become all the rage in the past, let's say, decade or so. And as the years go by, we see investors giving more and more attention to these matters. And Serbia, trying to keep up with this trend, is doing its own part in keeping to that trend. So I think we can talk about, in that regard, and that will lead me to the answer to that question, but I think context is important. So we have a set of voluntary compliance mechanisms that inadvertently lead us all to a situation in which we need to give more attention to ESG, and that is largely driven due to large corporate firms that do business in Serbia, and also international finance institutions. So their approach to ESG has also shaped the approach of local market players in Serbia. So those would be voluntary compliance mechanisms with ESG principles or core values that I'll be talking about today. But when we talk about involuntary compliance mechanisms, that's where I come in as a legal advisor who has some experience in infrastructure financing and stuff like that, to not bore you with those details. But I think the important question is, I think for me today, and I think a dedicated panel afterwards is going to talk about legal topics on ESG, is where is Serbia when it comes to the legal framework that addresses ESG matters? And Serbia is also on an international level and, let's say, local level, very much committed to, I think, following these trends and implementing them as best as it can, given the circumstances that it is in. So first of all, its membership in a variety of international institutions and being a party to international agreements warrants a commitment needing to be made on the side of the government. For example, the UN's 2030 agenda, which Serbia has adopted and committed to, that requires implementation of 17 core values of sustainability. And a number of different international treaties, bilateral treaties that are aimed at instilling ESG principles across the board in all markets that Serbia has an interest in working in. So that would be, let's say, the international context. And on a legislative floor, let's say, as opposed to, for example, Germany, where there is legislation that specifically deals with ESG matters and principles. In Serbia, the approach is a bit different, but not necessarily of a lesser value. And that is that we have a set of different laws, 20, 30, 40 different pieces of legislation that deal with different matters that very much so fall under the cap of ESG. For example, the law on accounting that is in place from 2021 has instilled an obligation for large corporates that provide a service of public interest, that have more than 500 employees. They need to deal with non-financial reporting, and that's something that's been taken from EU directives. When we talk about, let's switch to environmental aspects. So the first letter in the abbreviation, the law on climate change, also enacted in 2021, deals with how Serbia intends to deal with greenhouse gas emissions and dealing with them in an economically sustainable way. These are all core principles that have their origin in international instruments, international objectives. When we talk about social, that leads us to employment matters, labor laterals, gender equality, protection of motherhood, protecting whistleblowers. So when I get asked the question, where we are with our legal framework when it comes to ESG, I say we're there. It's a process, and I think there is a dedicated interest of the Republic of Serbia to follow these trends and have the legislation follow through in those tasks.
Sorry, when you compare for example, our legislation and the European Union, where we are in percentage, for example? You mentioned 30 different laws and many sub-laws, or how it's calling.
How much time do you have?
Just shortly.
I mean, it obviously depends on the specific area of law, but for example, employment is something that I think, and labor law is something that I think is very much aligned with, at least on paper, with the context that the European Union legislative gives. Also, I think everybody can appreciate the fact that renewable energy sources is something that's very much a hot topic, and I think that's also not borrowed but adopted from as a foreign concept, needing to move from fossil fuels to something else that you also mentioned in your introduction. So my answer is it depends on what specific piece of legislation we're talking about, but I think what's important is that there is a trend of keeping to what the benchmark is or what the standard is on the level of the European Union, which obviously has its context in the fact that we like to accede to the European Union at some point in time.
Thank you, Ina. So the FAIH, you're representing all entrepreneurs from Turkey who is coming here in Serbia, but also you're advisor of CEO of the Halk Bank. So you're also my colleague. What do you think in respect of the Turkish developers, entrepreneurs how they are see Serbian market, and we are seeing that in the last 10 years, 15 years, we had a huge progress of investment from the Turkey, and on that wave, please give us insight.
Thank you for the introduction. Well, I've been living in Serbia since 2012, and the past 10 to 11 years, I've seen the huge progress in the investment from Turkish side to Serbia. From here, what I would like to mention is that there are, from Turkish investor point of view, Serbia is like a first step to Europe, first step to go international, let's say Balkans in general. But in Serbia, you're closer to Europe, you're closer to European regulations, you're closer to your final destination, because in Turkey is an export-oriented country, which is heavily dependent on importing. For the raw material I'm talking about in general. So our major in Turkey, the biggest market is in Europe. And in order to go to Europe, if you have an establishment in Serbia, it's much faster, easier to reach your target. We have different sectors invested already in Serbia. We have automotive companies, production companies, textile factories, aluminium, this how we call PVC companies. So different sectors we have. And recently, because if we're also talking about real estate, many real estate companies are coming and searching the market, how to invest in here. From the point of Turkish investors' perception in Serbia, or let's say not only Serbia, but in any other country than Turkey, the first thing is they want to test the market, to see the market. So they want to enter with smaller projects, to see how it goes, to understand the system, the legislations, the working habitat and everything. And but sometimes they're a little bit late, because one project, Serbia is now the hotspot in the real estate. Any project that is feasible or good project doesn't stay in the market long. But from the investor point of view, when they come and start checking these, let's say, criteria, until they decide, the job is already gone, and they have to go another one and another one. At the end, they end up with finding nothing. The big projects, like infrastructure projects, which are mostly backed up by the government, by the states, is already done because they go through the governmental point of view. Like we have here on the infrastructure projects, we know the companies already. But we are in the lack of construction point, some big company who's coming here and investing and doing a building and or showing some project and saying like, okay, this is how we do it. So when it comes to them, the first perception of Serbia is, as I said, the first door to going out of Turkey. Especially Serbia being a fixed, stable country when you compare with our hometown. The investments here will be related or will be somehow converted to euros, and incomes can be converted to euros as well. This is one stable point. The other part is like when you build a business here, then you can use it as a reference for the other region or even for the Europe for future. So it shows that you can do business abroad. It doesn't matter how big projects you have in your own country, you know, the system is different, but when you have a project abroad, it's completely different understanding. So these are the positive, let's say, main aspects. But one, let's say the main...
There is negative?
Let's say not negative, but there is some question marks, especially in the labor-intensive companies. Due to the lack of labor in Serbia, we all know it. Yes. So if an investor comes here, especially labor-intensive, they need to find huge numbers of workers. We have some examples, some companies, they couldn't find hundreds of employees for the last 5-6 years. Not that there were not people, but it's always, let's say, there's always movement. Somebody starts, 6 months later they leave, they have to find another 1 year, somebody else comes. From the country point of view, from Serbia, as I'm living in Serbia, I see this is like a positive thing, meaning people have jobs, right? In one point. So when you cannot find an employee, that means people have jobs.
It's positive for the economy.
Yeah, it's positive for the economy. But for labor-intensive companies, especially, I'm mentioning this because if you're a technology-intensive company, you're not having that kind of problem because your base salary is high. Then you can find easier employees. But lower level, which comes to construction, especially because of speaking on that point. Also in the construction, they cannot find workers, and they bring from their own workers from Turkey. Over there we have advantage, my legal related colleagues will help here. There's an agreement with Turkey and Serbia that for some years they can work here with the official permit without hassling all documentation. It's an advantage, but at the end, labor is the main point for these kind of companies. So to sum up, for the Turkish investors, Serbia is a very good first step to go out of the country. This is a good test for them to see how they can do business abroad, and plus similar lifestyles that they like to come, and they don't feel like they're in another universe, let's say. They have many similar food, let's say, and hospitality of the people. That's quite similar what we have. So Serbia is like a safe first step to see how their business can improve abroad. We, as the Turkish-Serbian Business Association, our main goal here is to create this bridge between these Turkish investors and the Serbian legislations and Serbian regulations, to explain them what are the differences, what are the similarities, what they can do easier, or they need to go more different procedural way. We're trying to explain them the market so that they enter much faster. Hopefully we will have more success in the near future. We have some good big businessmen came. Still, it's always coming, let's say.
It's
Plus,
process. It's
process. Yeah. It's a process. As also in the bank, I see, because when they come, they also contact our department first to speak as a Turkish speaker, to ask what's going on here. So we can guide them from financial point of view. We can guide them from the infrastructural point of view of the country. And when they need support, we guide them to our legal services, our other related parties, related companies. And we're trying to create them this safe feeling that here they can invest without any doubt.
Yeah, sorry, one question related to ESG standards. So I'm not familiar with Turkish. Well, they are following the EU standards, or how do you see is there a difference between us and Turkey?
Well, Turkey is also on the way to European Union for the last decades. How many decades we don't know?
Started 1959, if
Exactly.
I remember.
I don't even count anymore.
Yeah.
However, you know how we say the destination is not the important, but the travel, the journey is the most important. So on that journey we learn. And in Turkey, the reason that in the last 20-30 years how we improved this much is actually this journey. So when we see something from European Union that we need to implement, we can see the parts that what we were doing, if we were doing wrong, if we were doing in another way, but it's better this way. So from that journey, we are in the same path, let's say, with Serbia. In the journey, as long as, regardless of entering that system or not, but the journey teaches you some things. And if you get the good lessons from that journey, then you're improved anyway. So most of Turkish companies are following these European Union standards, especially the ones that I mentioned, this, let's say, because we're exporting to European Union, and they're asking those standards from us. So in order to create those standards, or in order to work in those standards, you have to implement those. And now in the near future, like you mentioned in the beginning as well, like my friend Mina mentioned right now, that now it will come to the green investments. You know, if you use green energy for the production, you will have better conditions. You will have, I don't know, advantages. So now they are on the way of understanding the system, how it will work. In Turkey, there are so many green energy. I mean, wind farms, if you've been to, you will see wind farms, solar farms. It's quite huge number of investments over there. Hopefully, we will see those in Serbia as well. And those green energy production will help the companies to be able to comply to those European Union regulations. So we're on the same path, Turkey and Serbia, for this European Union point, and in that path, in that journey, what we learn will improve, I hope, the economy and the countries.
So we can also expect the companies from Turkey that they are coming here are bringing some technologies.
Technology, yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
because you mentioned that there is plenty of project finished in Turkey. Yeah.
Yes. In energy, they are still waiting for these legislations to be, let's say, finalized in Serbia. What in the pipeline now, I can remember immediately 3-4 companies, both in solar and wind farms, waiting information from our side to inform them that they can come and start the investments. So there is demand.
Excellent.
There is demand.
Thank you. Falih. So we are coming to my friend Philip. Unicredit Bank is one of the leading bank on the market in terms of assets under management, but also one of the bank with who is focusing a lot to principles, ESG principles. And please give us a little bit sight of what is current status on the banking market and where is the Unicredit Bank compared to the others, and how you see the future.
Well, yes, thank you, Vlad. First of all, I think answering your question related to the banking sector as a whole would be much more difficult if you asked me 10 years ago on this same place, but one could argue that looking right now at the banking sector, all the parameters, the balance sheets of the bank, the P&L reports, that the situation is maybe best ever. If we look at the parameters like adequacy, capital adequacy ratios, they're fairly high, meaning that the banks are solvent. You know that currently, according to the latest data of MBS, capital adequacy ratio on the entire segment is 20.5. The minimum set by the law is 10.6. So this is something which shows the solvency of the market. Also, when you look at the balance sheets, they look quite healthy. Banks are funded mostly through deposits. Roughly 40 comes from the corporates, 30% from the households. Overall, this is looking very positive. Also, when it comes to NPL ratios, you remember that in 2015, NPL ratio was 25%. Nowadays, it's at a historically low level. It's at 3%. If we look at the corporates, it's even lower. It's at 2%. So this is really a very good number. And overall, if we also add the liquidity position of the bank, it's fairly high. When we look at the structure of them, it's 40% of it is liquid assets, showing that banks are, on one hand, having liquidity, having good capacity to absorb all the potential shocks that may happen on the market. And this is on a positive side. What we see as a headwind on the banking sector and overall in the corporates as well is the overall macro situation, characterized mostly by the inflation, which is something which was not a topic for years past. Also, consequently, we have a monetary policy which is across the board tightening by all the major banks, and this is having, of course, implications on lending. So what we are seeing now is the decrease in the overall lending in Serbian market. Yes, part of it is related to the high base, to the fact that there was this COVID scheme that the government provided 3 years ago, and then these loans are maturing, but overall we see a decrease in lending, but this is a smaller one, but still. But I would say that this is something that comes natural given all the headwinds that we are facing. So inflation and consequent monetary policy being mostly the key ones that are here and that are going, as it seems, are going to be there for a while.
We saw that the inflation, is going very fast up, and it's coming to 2-digit. And then when the monetary policy, the national banks are trying to decrease it, it's not going so fast. So it's like 3 times more consuming times to reduce inflation to,
Yes, this is obviously a challenge that's ahead of all of us. It's something that it's always $1 million question. You remember that only 3 years ago we were saying that the rates are going to remain negative for the next 5 years, etc. And it's always difficult to estimate what is going to happen. The only thing that we can do is to follow what ECB is saying and what the inflation print are showing. As you know, last week they have increased the key rate to 3.5. Afterwards, first the communication by the President Lagarde was saying that definitely something that the market is pricing in is another increase of 25 basis points. Yes, 3.75. And then she also stated that it's not out of the possibility that we see another increase after the summer break. If we also look at some of the other members of the ECB Council, for example, like the German Bundesbank president, he also is somebody who is more hawkish, so more inclined to the increase of interest rate. The market is now seeing this as a possibility that this rate will increase even in September to 4%, meaning that this would be so-called terminal rate, meaning the highest possible rate after which we can expect the interest rates to go down. But it's important to follow, like I mentioned, the inflation and the numbers of inflation. Lately, what we have seen is that they have, in terms of their inflation projections, said that it should even go up a bit in 2025. And what's the implication of this on all of us is that higher interest rates are most likely to stay up for a longer period. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to estimate what is going to happen. You remember, first storyline was that the inflation was transitory. Transitory was the buzzword that we all kept hearing. Now, obviously, it seems that the rates are going to remain for this period longer. For us, as a bank, what it means is that simply some projects will not fly with these high of an interest rates. Our policies, our credit risk policies are not going to change. I can see some colleagues from other banks as well in the room. I think they can all confirm. Credit risk policies are not going to change, but our assumptions in the model, in the projection of the particular project, of the particular company, are going to be much more conservative based on the figures that we are seeing. And I think that generally all of us need to have a more conservative view. I'm not speaking only as a lender, but also as an investor. We need to take into account the entire environment, which is very difficult, ranging from energy costs to construction costs to labor costs, and in the end to the higher financing costs. So obviously, things are going to change in the future, but it does not mean that it's necessary for the worse.
Yeah, it's challenging time. So when we see the expensive money producing something else, but also reducing the GDP of the economies. And we saw that in the European Union, it's estimated that its forecast for this year is something 0.9. In USA, is also something about 1%. But we're seeing also that they are giving us a little bit more, like 2.2, 2.6%, which is reflecting that we have also some potential to better use the money and to better find the project and finance this. It's look like this, so it's some kind of positive impact. A part of that interest rates are I don't know, historical maximum.
Yes, definitely. The liquidity is there on the market. It's just a question of which projects can sustain this higher cost than the costs have been in the recent years.
Do you think that this interest rate could slow down a little bit the topic which we are speaking about, you know, implementing ESG principles and so on? So we will not stop. We are on path to the, you know, to implement, but then we have this momentum which is not favor to support, or how do you see this?
No, for this, for sure, this agenda will continue. It will continue in a sense, you know, how we assess certain projects in terms of their ESG impact. For sure, what we are seeing, because on the other side, we as a bank also use different lines from finance institutions abroad to fund our customers. We
With
know,
better rate,
yes,
rate.
we know how much of these lines are related to ESG. I would say that roughly the inquiries that we get from different supranational organizations, 80 or 90% of those lines have a certain ESG component in it. So the liquidity is there, I would say, for sure. Of course, you know, these interest rate costs are going to affect certain projects, but I wouldn't say that there is no way that this agenda will be slowed down.
Thank you. So we are coming to our next panelist. It's Bogdan Vujovic. Bogdan, I met you before 4 years, if I remember, and then you spoke about tokenization, but please, because tokenization is still a little bit far away from the minds of most of the people, give us a little bit insight what is tokenization and where is the relation with real estate and tokenization in Serbia.
Thank you, Vladimir. Do you hear me okay? Great. Thank you for having me here. Just a little, very little introduction from my side. I am, as Vladimir mentioned, lawyer and economist. I'm primarily a lawyer, specialized in legal advising of fintech, digital assets, and blockchain companies, and tokenization. Today we will be talking more about tokenization and the connection between real estate and tokenization. When it comes to tokenization, what is a tokenization basically? Basically, it's a process where you convert any asset or right into a token. So what is a token? Token is basically a file which is on the blockchain, and as I said, you can store basically any right or assets in that token and trade it electronically. So when we speak about token and tokenizations, just for the sake of clarity, we need to know that digital tokens are one of two types of digital assets. We in Serbia, we have a law on digital assets, and maybe we can later talk more about our regulatory framework for digital assets. But for this moment, what we need to know is there are two types of digital assets or crypto assets. Digital assets or crypto assets are pretty much the synonyms. It's the same stuff. But it is very important to make a difference between two types. First is virtual currency or cryptocurrency. I'm sure that you have all heard about cryptocurrency and that you are most familiar with the term cryptocurrency. So what is the virtual currency or cryptocurrency? It is not the same as digital token, and we will see why it is not the same. So virtual currency or cryptocurrency is basically, you can understand it as a means of an exchange which is not issued by any central bank or any government body or any authority in that regard. No one can guarantee you the value of that. Its value is basically derived from the supply and demand, like any market commodity. The best example for cryptocurrency would be Bitcoin. I'm completely sure that all of you have heard for Bitcoin. It's basically a decentralized peer-to-peer monetary system, let's call it that way. On the other hand, we have digital tokens, and we will talk more about digital tokens today. As I said, you can incorporate any kind of asset or right into the digital token, and it's very important to remember that. Tokenization uses blockchain as a technology. I'm sure that you all heard about blockchain, and we will cover it up shortly in few sentences. What is the blockchain? Blockchain is basically a decentralized database. It's a digital storage of all the transactions that have ever occurred in a certain network. For example, Bitcoin network, you can see all the transactions that have ever happened from 2009 to today. And what is the catch with the blockchain as a technology? No one can erase, no one can modify, no one can add transaction if there is not a consensus. I wouldn't bother you with all the technical details. It is really not that important, but what is important for you to grasp now is that blockchain, and Bitcoin for that matter, is the very first technology that have solved the problem of double spending in the digital world. And that's really, really huge. There are a lot of bankers here, as my colleague said, and you all know that it is a huge problem when it comes to digital payment, how to prevent one person to spend the money twice, 3 times or more. But Bitcoin has solved it, and there is no way for you to break it. Let's come back to the tokenization. As I said, tokenization is the process of converting any right or asset to the blockchain. Why would anyone want to tokenize anything, especially real estate? I mean, what are some advantages of real estate tokenization? The first obvious advantage would be wider base of investors. For example, if I am a developer and I have an existing real estate project, or I am making a new project from the scratch and I need the capital, I don't need to rely only on the banks. I mean, banks are an obvious example of raising capital. I do not need to rely to some private wealth individuals. I can raise the money from the wider base of investors. When I say wider base of investors, I primarily mean natural persons as well as companies who want to invest in a new asset class. I mean new asset class for them. We all know that real estate is maybe the biggest asset class. I don't know, maybe the global value of all real estate, commercial, residential, land is far more than $300 trillion. So it's a very interesting market for being tokenized. Another benefit for tokenization of real estate would be liquidity. Why liquidity? Because we all know that real estate is one of the most illiquid asset classes globally. And with tokenization, you can basically trade a part of that real estate. In the next section, we can talk more about models of real estate tokenization and to see what are some drawbacks as well, because it's not only good, there are some not good sides as well.
Some minuses.
Of course, as everything in life, that's the same with tokenization. As I said, the second benefit would be liquidity. The third would be efficiency. It is much, much easier, much more cost-effective to trade tokens on the blockchain, where the clearing and settlement of the transactions can be done within a few minutes or maybe even a few seconds, than to do clearing and settlement of any security or any financial instrument whatsoever. And the fourth advantage to tokenizing real estate would be transparency. I mentioned when I was talking about blockchain that blockchain is basically a digital ledger where you cannot erase, modify, or add new transactions. So basically there is not a possibility to cheat on transactions. And the fifth maybe would be the automatization of entire process via the smart contract, where you can pay the dividends, you can pay the rent during the with the smart contract, and basically everything can be automated.
Thank you. So, Mina, just shortly, because we run out of time and it's just minutes per person, 2 minutes, what challenges deal with as advisor in the face of increasing ESG demands? From your perspective, from perspective of your company?
I think that the legal sector isn't special in its challenges it faces, because we are there to service clients' needs. And I think it's the market players that have challenges. And those challenges when it comes to ESG are very much associated with understanding what the criteria is, what the threshold is, because ESG as such has a set of principles that are not quantifiable. Like if you have a specific goal or a target in numbers, that's easy to track, that's easy to implement. But there are other things, and the majority of things in ESG, I think, can also be put in a non-quantitative perspective. And then in that sense, for us as legal advisors, it's difficult to relay a message of this is what you need to do and this is how you need to track it, when in essence there's a lack of standardization or setting parameters on how something like that should be implemented. And also another aspect of the issues are definitely, as I mentioned earlier when I spoke, there is a legal framework that supports ESG and its development in Serbia, but it's very much a process. So our job is obviously to identify in which sense that legislative framework is deficient, where we expect there to be hurdles in implementation, because our job doesn't stop when we get you out the door. Our job continues when you come back with issues and problems that we need to deal with in stride. And I think, monitoring those things is definitely a challenge for us, and then finding a solution, because all clients are solution oriented, and it's not necessarily helpful for us to just flag a problem.
Thank you, Mina. So, Faik, you mentioned that there is investors from Turkey, but could you briefly tell us what they are interested in? What is the type of investors? Is it short run, long run, medium run? Who are they?
Well, I can categorize them in, like, let's say 3 basic categories. One of which is corporate investors. The other, I might say, like SME, mid-sized investors, and then there's this entrepreneurs. Corporate investors are the ones who actually we meet after they decide investment generally, because they already do their due diligence before coming to us, let's say. They already have a internally organized system, and either they come to us just like for final thoughts, like we already invested here this amount. I mean, from the banking point of view, how to open an account, or from some advices, let's say small advices, but it's already done deal, let's say. And then there are these mid-size investors. These corporate investors are very let's say, long-term investments. There are mid-size investments, which I can say also are focused on long-term. And what they want to, they are less in the organization point of view. They just first want to come, learn the system, ask questions, how we can do it. In that part, we have some kind of language barrier, because in the SME and below entrepreneurs level, we do not have so much easy understanding for English from the investor point of view, or normally compared to the corporates, exactly, compared to the corporates. And over there, they mostly come to us asking support. Okay, we plan to invest here up to this amount for this project, but can you help us find, I don't know, lawyers, accountants, translators, where should we go, what should we do? Over there, we mostly integrate with those kind of investors. They are also, let's say, mid to long-term investment plans. And then there are some entrepreneurs who I can say mostly come for the idea of having an investment abroad, but not so much decided what to do. I had some examples coming saying like, okay, we want to invest here we want to do sales of carpets, and we say, okay, we will help you, but if not carpets, we can do buildings. Or let's produce some plastic bottles, you know, that also comes to us. They have some money, they have some idea, they have some knowledge. They say, okay, I have a friend who produces bottles, we can come together. Or I know how to do carpets, or the other will come. So this is the entrepreneur level who are, let's say, in a wider, broader range. Over there, we try to guide them to the point, to the road, to the path that they know. Meaning we say like, okay, we understand you have many, let's say, many possibilities. Just tell us what you actually do, what you know what to do. And then we can guide you better, not to do something that your friend or somebody else who has it, but you're just the investor. So we mostly focus on these SME and corporate point of investors to help them to stabilize their businesses here. Also for these investors, there's also the positive part of, let's say, lifestyle. Most of our investors come from big cities from Turkey, meaning Istanbul, Ankara, which have millions of people living, especially the ones who have visited Istanbul might say that. Here the life living, the quality of life is better. Meaning you don't spend 3 hours, 4 hours in traffic. You don't spend
We are saying here that traffic jam should go to Istanbul or to see it, what is the traffic jam?
To be honest, there's no traffic jam in Belgrade when you come from Istanbul. Regardless, I mean, I'm living on the old city part. My work is on New Belgrade. If there's no traffic, normal weekends, I come in 10 to 15 minutes. If there's the highest traffic, it takes 45 minutes. For a person coming from Turkey, it's like, I mean, normal day. I remember spending 3 hours on one way, just going up, having one meeting.
It's like balance between
Exactly.
the work and then the
And this-
lifestyle, yeah.
This improves the quality of life, and this is also now the lack of the lack of people in general in the world, not only Turkey. I'm talking about. People they don't want to spend so much time on unnecessary, let's say, loss of lifestyle.
Thank you, Mike. So we're coming to Philip. Please tell us shortly. Bank is always implementing some procedures, and I'm sure that currently you have some project related to ESG standards, or can you share with us something?
Sure, but I would say that this change which came with the ESG and general importance of this topic is not related to procedures, policies, or lending principles, etc. only. It's something that really has changed our corporate culture and our mindset. Just for you to understand, UniCredit as a group, which is listed on the exchange with around 40 billion euros market cap, has many shareholders. The biggest one has a 6% share in the bank. 85% of them are institutional investors who all have strict requirements when it comes to ESG. And this is coming across the entire bank. So it's not only related to assessing whether this project has these standards implied, whether this corporate has these standards. It's across the board. It's the way we do business. For example, when we choose, I don't know, the branch office, ESG assessment will be a part of it. When we look at the IT supplier, this will be a part of it. Our management is not reporting only, you know, the regulatory requirements. It's not only reporting the P&L, it's also reporting where we are in terms of ESG implementation. So this is something which is in our focus, definitely. We are willing to provide that. For example, our focus is on this, just to give you a flavor, in Serbia we have a market share of roughly 13-14%. When it comes to wind parks, we have 7 in Serbia. We have financed 5 of them. So this is surely something that is going to be in our core strategy going forward, without a doubt.
Thank you. We're coming back again to our friend Bogdan. Bogdan, tell us, okay, we speak about tokenization, but what are the benefits for real estate, and how you see these benefits that can be used here in Serbia?
Well, unfortunately or not, real estate is the #1 investment option in Serbia, especially for natural person. And it's okay. I can completely understand that someone wants to invest money in something that can touch, smell, that is visible, that cannot be easily taken away, which is arguable. But if we are talking about the benefits of tokenization of real estate sector in Serbia, in my opinion, the first benefit would be raising capital through the tokens, as I mentioned earlier. I can elaborate a bit now. For example, if I, as a developer, if I have a problem getting a credit from the bank, not to go into details why I have a problem with the bank, or I don't want to take a loan from the bank, I mean, I want to have some, I want to diversify my sources of income. As I said, I can issue the token and I can raise capital from the natural and legal person. That would be the first benefit. The benefit, in the same time, the benefit for those natural and legal person would be that they have the possibility to invest in a new asset class in a way that was not possible before. Because if I want to invest in a real estate as a natural person, the obvious way would be to make a down payment and to get a loan from the bank and to finance the purchase of the real estate. And if I'm lucky enough, but actually now I don't have to be that lucky, I can rent that apartment and I can make a positive difference between the rate and the rent. And that would be that is now the best possible option, and it is the most used option. But with the tokenization of real estate, that doesn't have to be a case. I mentioned that I will just briefly talk about the models of tokenizing real estate and why is that important for a question that Vladimir asked me. Actually, there are three ways to tokenize real estate. First is to tokenize the equity in the real estate. Since the 99.9999, maybe even 100% of all global land registers do not recognize blockchain technology and tokens. It means that I can send you whatever token I want, but in order for you to become a legal owner of that real estate, you must be written into the proper land register, and that's it. So the direct tokenization of equity in the real estate now is not possible. What is possible? You can make in a company, SPV, who is the sole owner of that real estate, and you can tokenize that SPV. It is an okay option, but it's not the best possible option because it can be a costly one. Second option would be the classical debt, meaning that you issue a tokenized bond, which is used for financing real estate project. That bond obviously can have a fixed interest rate, it can have variable interest rate, and it can have some combination of those two. And the third option is a sort of revenue share. For example, I'm issuing tokens for a certain real estate. My investors are not interested in having ownership of that real estate and don't want to bother with the land register or whatsoever. They just want an economic profit out of that endeavor, and they bought tokens, which are revenue share tokens, and they get a percentage of a revenue, not profit, but a revenue, meaning it's an operational expense. So those are basically the three main ways for tokenizing real estate. If we take a global practice, which is still in its infancy, the definitely most used way of tokenizing real estate is the second one, meaning the debt. Basically tokenized debt. And another benefit that I forgot to mention, but I think it's really, really important for any company wanting to tokenize, not just real estate, but basically anything. But now we're talking about real estate. The huge, huge benefit nowadays, not just in Serbia, but also globally, is the marketing point of view. Why? Because you would be the first or among the first. In Serbia, you would be the first company that has issued a digital token related to real estate. And that fact by itself would give a huge, huge media coverage. I don't know any other way how you, which we are doing some kind of no traditional classic industry such as real estate, how you can gain that much of publicity. Maybe you can, but I don't know how.
Thank you, Bogdan. So we run out of time. Maybe do we have some questions from audience for, yes, please.
So on the banking side, just a couple of questions. Is the bank taking, a couple questions on the banking side. Are you guys taking construction risk, development risk? Where are you putting the loans, and how difficult is it for companies on the refinancing projects these days?
I would say, of course, we are also financing the construction part as well in here, as some of the clients are here as well and can relate to this. But generally, this is something, the refinancing part afterwards is usually agreed in principle in advance. So far, of course, the market has been very good, and we have seen that all of this has functioned very well in the last several years here in Serbia.
And what sectors are you focusing on mainly for financing? Or what if, let's say,
In
from
terms of-
top to bottom of
I wouldn't
interest?
say that we would split it. We also prefer to have a diverse portfolio as well. It's not like we are going to go only in residential and leave, office behind. Being as a bank, for us, it's always important to have this diversified, So it depends. We assess project by itself, so it's not like there's a no-go in a certain subsegment.
Okay, so all sectors are open, it just matters on the profit or the deal, okay.
Thank you. Any questions more? So, thank you, my panelists. Thank you, audience. I think that there is always shortage of time, so we can speak whole day. But I think that we tackled the subject and we give some answers. So I hope so. See you next year on the 17th REBEC. Thank you. Thank you very much.